the number one reason that people left. 23% of respondents. So almost 3x, 2.5 times X, the number who leave for money, left because there wasn't a clear path forward for their future with the organization.
What's up, agency owners? Jason Swenk here with another great episode of the Smart Agency Masterclass, a podcast for the digital agency owner that wants to scale and grow their agency faster. And you can scale and grow your agency faster if you keep your employees. And on today's episode, I have a repeat guest, and we're going to talk about how to never lose an employee again. Because when you lose an employee, then you have to train, and it really gets you out of sync. So I can't wait to jump into this episode. Hey, Joey, welcome back.
Hey, Jason, thanks so much for having me back. And thanks to everybody who's listening in, watching in. Super excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, for the people that have not checked out the first episode, tell us who you are and what do you do?
So my name is Joey Coleman, and I've spent the last 20 years teaching organizations, including agencies, how to keep their customers and keep their employees. We do that through a model of keynote presentations, workshops, consulting engagements, all built around the experience. What is the experience that you're designing and delivering to the folks you serve, whether that's externally as customers or internally as employees? And how can you make that experience as remarkable as possible to keep those people coming back for more?
And side note, you're a recovering lawyer, and one of the most helpful things you told me was how to get out of speeding tickets. And so I was telling you how I got out of 2 speeding tickets. Joey was at our agency experience a couple of years ago and came to the house and we were just chatting on the side. He was like, "This is how you get out of every ticket." I'm like, "This is brilliant." So we will leave cliffhangers for that. Maybe we'll create a lead magnet for that later on.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, let's just say I have a long career of both representing folks in front for various speeding tickets and also having a little bit of a lead foot myself. So that is something that we can explore. It's about the experience you create, right? What is the experience you create on the side of the road to let that law enforcement officer know that writing you a ticket is probably not in anyone's best interest? And what can we do to make everybody feel good about that choice?
Well, I came up with your next book, and I want your royalties: How to Never Get a Speeding Ticket Ever Again.
I love it. You know, I actually years ago thought about writing that book, but I wanted to do it under a pseudonym because I never wanted to be the guy who got pulled over and had the person going, "You're the one. You're the one who's responsible for this." So yeah, that may be a side hustle project that I developed.
There you
someday.
go. Well, just send me the royalty checks.
I definitely will. There you go.
Well, let's get into why are companies, and specifically agencies, why do they lose employees? Let's get into there before we talk about how to fix it.
Yeah. So what's interesting is if you talk to most agency owners and you ask, why did you lose that person, right? They've lost someone. Most leaders, most owners, most CEOs will tell you, well, because they're going to get paid more by the competition. We lost them because of money. And what's fascinating is, as a recovering attorney, I like to look first to the research and then to the psychology behavior and then try to figure out what we can do to make it different. So let's look first to the research. Most research that has been done on why employees leave is based on a sample set of somewhere between 200 and 500 exit interviews. Now, if you know anything about statistics, and folks, if you don't know anything about statistics, don't feel bad. Most people don't. That is a really small sample set from which to try to extrapolate any learnings. In doing the research for Never Lose an Employee Again, I found a study done by the folks at the Work Institute that looked at exit interviews for 234,000 employees across 17 different industries. So this is a massive study, the biggest study that I think has ever been done. Oh, and by the way, it was a third-party study, meaning the person doing the exit interview was not an employee of the company being exited, which all the research shows, again, in this study, but also in psychology research in general, if the person that's asking the question is not the person who caused the issue, you get a closer answer to the truth than what somebody would tell you. And the research showed as follows that yes, indeed, there are employees who leave for more money, but that represents 9% of employees. Now, while some people listening might say, well, Jason, Joey, I was right. Yes, you were 9% of the time. I'm more curious as to the other 91%. Why do people leave? And there were a host of reasons they leave, and we can dive into those. But the number one reason that people left, 23% of respondents, so almost 3x, 2.5 times X, the number who leave for money, left because there wasn't a clear path forward for their future with the organization. They didn't understand what the next job they would have at that company was. Now, when we think about this, it kind of makes sense. We've all probably had those experiences where you're in the job and you're looking at your boss and you're going, my boss just got promoted 2 years ago and has another 15 years before they retire. And the person that was previously in this job retired at 68, and my boss is in their mid 40s. It's going to be over a decade before I have the chance to have my boss's job. This isn't worth staying around. I'm out. And agency owners, where you see this show up the most is with your creative directors. If you have anyone in your agency who has aspirations of being a creative director, they're looking at your creative director and saying, how much longer is that person going to be in the job before I have the opportunity to get into this role? And if you haven't explicitly and specifically addressed this with those employees, they're going to leave. That's just all there is to it.
Well, after I sold my agency, I remember I worked for the agency that bought us. And I thought that would be amazing because I was like, well, fantastic. I don't have to worry about all the crap. I can just do all the amazing things. And they kind of made up this made up title for me, but I didn't have any growth. There was nothing after that. And I was like, I didn't have that significance or that contribution anymore. So I was like, I'm out of here. Like, this is like, it's just no fun. And, a lot of times I'm talking to agency owners and I'm like, the best thing you can do, and you tell me if this is kind of one of your 8 steps, is almost think about like in the military, right? You have unenlisted, right? These are the foot soldiers. These are the skilled people in your agency. And then you have the officer track. You have the officers, like they're managing people. They're the managers in your agency. And if you decide, or if you have them decide which is the track you want, and then help them get there, and then you plan the next 3 different steps above, they're always seeing that growth. Is that part of the 8 things, or?
Jason, I would say that is definitely a useful way of thinking about how to envision and also express a career path for an employee. The only challenge I would have with this, and we see it in the military too, is when we're asking people to decide, do you want to be on the officer or the enlisted track? Do you want to be on the leadership role or the skill set role? Often the decision they make when asked that question the first time is not the decision they want long term. It's that they don't know what they don't know. They haven't worked that job long enough, had that experience. So what I like to do is say, great, this is our plan for the next year. And then we're going to come in a year from now. And as part of your annual review, although I would posit, and the research shows you should do annual reviews twice a year. So it's actually a biannual review. Okay. Waiting a year is way too long. You've got to have a formalized process every 6 months, and you better have an informal process about every 2 to 3 months. We can dive into that as we go. But you want to give the opportunity for the employee to change their answer without negative repercussions. Now, here's the thing. All the agency owners listening, you might think, well, I wouldn't have negative repercussions. I get that you might not formally do that, or maybe even informally or intentionally do that, but they are going to be afraid that they're changing their answer. Why? Because they're human. And we are taught that, oh, you don't want to be a flip-flopper. You don't want to change your mind. You want to stay by the thing you decided. Well, I'm sorry. I personally believe that we should have strong values loosely held, right? We should be willing to say the landscape has changed. It's time for me to change my line of thinking. And especially if you're in a creative agency, oh my goodness, like this is the bread and butter of how we operate and how we live. But yet it seems like when we transition from the work we do externally for our clients to our behavior structurally, internally, in terms of how we treat our team, we expect a different level of certainty and behavior from our employees that we would never try to put out into the marketplace in terms of our creative. When you're dealing with creatives, you need to think creatively about how you manage and deal with them.
I like that you do it twice. The only thing that I didn't like that you said is I want to do a review because or how you phrased it. Who wants to get like, does any of your research show, because I always called it a coaching session, and I believe it should be quarterly or biannually. But I always hated like, oh, this is for your annual review. And I'm like, you're going to review me. And now I'm on the defensive rather than how can you build me up? Does any of the research or anything that you said kind of talk about that, like the negative things to stay away from?
Yeah, so 100% you are spot on, Jason, that language matters. But the great thing about language is we get to collectively choose how to define the words we use. So I would posit that part of the reason you bristle at the concept of a review has to do with your past career experience where somebody did a review
and it was horrible employee.
It was horrible. It was a horrible experience, right? So here's the thing.
Yeah.
When you talk about doing a review for an entrepreneur, they usually hate that. When you talk about doing a review for an employee, they usually like it. Why?
Really?
Because employees and employers are hardwired differently. As a general rule, employers, entrepreneurs in particular, agency leaders in particular, have a very high threshold for uncertainty. You didn't become an agency owner and start your agency if you weren't comfortable with vast amounts of uncertainty. The typical employee does not have that same level of comfort or familiarity with uncertainty. They want something that's more structured. They want something that's more clear, more obvious. They want to understand where they are in the process at all times. Are they moving forward? Are they making progress? Where could they improve? Where did they fall back? If an employer, an entrepreneur, took the time to do that level of analysis, they'd crawl back into bed and never get out again. Because their world is constantly changing. Their world is constantly different. That's why they are drawn to entrepreneurship. Often, Jason, people will say to me, well, I wish my employees thought as much about the business as I do.
Yeah.
Well, if they did, they would be entrepreneurs, not employees.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you actually, and you can decide, do we want to have entrepreneurial employees? That's great. And that can be a business model, but know that you're never going to hit the same level of retention numbers. You're never going to hit the same level of willingness to follow SOPs, standard operating procedures, and your ability to deliver a consistent experience to your clients is going to be greatly compromised as a result. Now, you can make that choice. Just know that every choice has a consequence. Instead, I love the healthy tension between the employer, the entrepreneur, the leader who says, I'm comfortable with uncertainty, but I'm going to figure out ways to give my team the certainty they need so that any ability they have to manage uncertainty gets channeled into the areas where it's most productive and most valuable for our agency.
I never thought about it that way. Like, so I'm training to start flying planes and, I've got hours and hours in the aircraft right now. And after every flight, we do a debrief and it's basically a review. And I actually look forward to it because I'm like, and what I found out was I was more harder on myself than my instructor. And so then he kind of brought me up, even though he was like, hey man, like you came down too fast. You weren't on the numbers, right? You were a little off center line. And I was like, okay, well, I needed more right rudder, more, less back pressure, that kind of stuff. And I couldn't wait for it. So, all right, I'm changing my answer.
I love it. Well, here's the thing though. Now, where I will agree with you is if you walk into a review saying, we are going to have this review so I can point out the areas where you are wrong and deficient and justify not giving you a raise, which is the attitude that a lot of people doing reviews come into with, you are absolutely right. You are destined for failure. That's why I like 360-degree reviews, where you're coming in and you're reviewing the team member, but they're also reviewing you. I just did one of these with my personal assistant. I call her my director of details, not my personal assistant. But for those listening, to give you context, the reason I call her director of details, and that's her title, her name is Faith, so I don't talk about her in the second person of her, right? The reason why Faith is the director of details is I want her to know in her title what her prime goal is: directing and details. I'm on the road 2.5 to 3 weeks out of every month. I'm traveling internationally. I'm giving speeches. I'm juggling lots of things. Her primary job is to make sure I'm in the right place at the right time with all the details I need to deliver the best client experience possible. We do a regular formal and informal review. And what we do is 3 questions. Okay. Our review basically operates with 3 questions: stop, start, continue. And it runs both ways. What are the things we start with her. So when we just had one of these literally 2 hours ago. So I would say, Faith, what are things, at least 2, if not 3 things that I am currently doing as it relates to our relationship that I should stop doing? Okay. And then I listen. I don't try to justify the reasons, and I get curious instead of getting critical. So she says, well, you should stop doing this. And then I said, well, why is that? What is that causing for you when I do that? What is the problem that's creating down the road? Okay. One of the things that just came up on ours is you should stop saying yes to having back to back to back to back meetings. And I say, okay, what angst does that create to you? And she says, well, when that happens and you're late to the next meeting, I'm fielding emails from people saying, is Joey still coming to the meeting? Oh, so my behavior is making your life worse. I never knew that. How could I have known that? I'm not getting the emails. So when we come from that opening of what should I stop doing, it allows us to see a perspective of our business we're not seeing. Next question, start. What are 3 things that you wish I was doing? What are some things that I should start doing? And last but not least, continue. And this is where the gold is, Jason. Everybody thinks the gold is in the stop and the start. The gold is in the continue, because relationships deepen when we believe that we have trust and consistency. So if I find out from my team member what it is that I'm naturally doing, that they love, that they want me to continue, that they want me to keep up, it may not be something that I'm even consciously aware of. But once they say, I love it that you pay me every 2 weeks on time, I now know, number one, thank you for reinforcing the job that I have as the leader of this organization to make sure you get paid. Thank you for appreciating what I do. And if I'm going to miss, this isn't the employee I want to ask to miss on. There may be another employee that I can say, hey, is it cool if I pay you next Monday instead of Friday if we're in a cash flow crunch or whatever it may be? It gives you context as to what's most important to them. And like I said, we run it both ways. They tell their stops, I tell my stops. They tell their starts, I tell my starts. They tell me their continues, I tell them my continues. And personally, as the leader, I have a policy of never adding a new one to the call based on what they've said. Because here's what'll happen. The employee will say, I would love it if you stopped doing this. Fine, I would love it if you start doing this, right? It's like, whoa, this is not a tit for tat. This is not a quicken response. That goes on my list for next time. And then if 2 or 3 months later, when we're doing our informal stop-start review session, I realize, that actually is something that is still kind of chapping my hide a little bit, or it's an issue that needs to be addressed. Then it comes onto the list when it's not as emotionally attached.
I really like the stop, start, continue. It is such a easy thing to remember, but like you were saying, you got to kind of have to have thick skin. And I've seen it where people have really thin skin and then they'll lash out. And then that team member will never, ever be honest with you again.
Jason, 100%. And is that fair?
Nope.
No. But is that human? Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, leaders, you signed up to lead your organization. You made a reference earlier to the military. I was having this conversation with an audience the other day. No one in the United States, no employee was drafted into their job. We don't, even in our military anymore, we don't have a draft. It's a volunteer position. Law enforcement, it's a volunteer position. Creative director, it's a volunteer position. Grocery bagger at the grocery store, it's a voluntary position. So if we're going through this thinking like, oh, you have to do this, we need to do that, people have choice. And employees need to remember that as much as employers remember that, right? Everybody has choice. And how are we navigating those choices and being cognizant of the fact that, we opted into this? The last thing I'll say on this, if I may, there's this great scene, and I can't remember. I think it might be in the movie Jerry Maguire, but it may be in a different movie. It's in a sports movie of some type. I think it's Jerry Maguire. And the woman says, "We agreed to be brutally honest."
That's Jerry Maguire. Yep.
And he's like,
his fiance.
I don't remember brutal. I remember brutally honest. Honest should never be modified by the word brutally. Okay. And that, I think, is something where often agency owners miss the mark. They think, well, if I don't come down hard on this and I don't explain this in a really strict and severe way, I'm never going to get the end results I need. No, I disagree wholeheartedly with that. I think we want to be honest. We want to cultivate a culture of honesty and accountability. But I think as a leader, one thing I always try to do is if an employee has, or a member of my team, I like to think of them as team members more than employees because it lets us know we're all in it together. When I think of a team member, if they miss on something, they drop the ball, they make a mistake, the first place I have tried to condition and train myself to go to is, what did I do that allowed this to happen? Instead of coming from a place of what did they make mistake, what did I do? I didn't have properly established standard operating procedures. I didn't spend as much time training as I should have. We just had this in a conversation with my director of details, Faith. She said, in the last month, we've gotten away from our daily check-in call. And the reason we've gotten away from our daily check-in call, let's be candid, is Joey. It's my fault. I've been scheduling stuff over it. I've been on the road. I've been doing stuff. And we'll just do it tomorrow. And what she shared with me is, if we don't have the daily check-in call, I have lots of things that I'm not entirely on the loop in, which means I can't perform as well as I know you want me to and as I know I want to. And I'm like, shoot, she's spot on. But if I haven't created the environment where she feels comfortable sharing that, I'm in trouble. Because either it's never going to get shared, or she's going to leave, or she's not going to be able to deliver at the level that I want and hope her to deliver at when navigating the details of my life.
There's one thing I see a lot of agencies and business owners struggle with, especially in every business. You can never climb the whole time, right? There's going to be kind of that roller coaster ride. A lot of times you get to a certain plateau, or sometimes you start going down the opposite side. And as entrepreneurs and agency owners and just human beings, it really kind of messes with your mind. And then you kind of project that to your team members of the world's ending. What are we doing? Oh no, we lost another person. We lost another client. And then, I just remember this at the agency, even in this business of you'll be pissed off and then you project that to your team. Yep. And then your team thinks, oh shit, the company's going the wrong direction. It's sinking. I need to get off the Titanic. How can you combat that?
Well, first of all, I think you're spot on, Jason. We start projecting that. And then what reaction would we expect our team to have? Right? If we step out of the reaction and we say, and because then often what happens is the agency owner gets angry when those team members leave. And then they say, see, it's even worse. Now everybody's leaving. And it's no, you made this scenario. I'm a big fan of when we think about these Two thoughts. Number one, I think it's important to avoid, in any time we're in a state of conflict, to avoid being overly historical or overly hysterical. What I mean by that is not presuming that just because it happened this way before means it's going to continue to happen this way in the future. And also, in my opinion, the responsibility of a leader is to never make the circumstance worse than it actually is. Okay? I understand you care about your agency. I understand you care about your business, and you probably in some ways care about your agency or your business more than you potentially do your spouse, your children, yourself. Okay. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying I've met enough agency owners that I know that that's a common behavior. We need to get a little more, how shall I say, a little more realistic about where the role these things have placed. The second thing I'll say is Adam Grant had a recent post on LinkedIn about this that I thought addressed it beautifully. And it was kind of the ups and downs of life. And it was in the context of employee burnout. Like, we're working a lot, things slow down, we're working a lot more. And so many employers come at that with, oh, let's get a meditation app and let's have a happy hour Friday. And they throw all these little band-aids on it instead of saying, what is the actual workload we're expecting the team to deliver on? And is that reasonable? Why is it that we work from 9 to 5? Well, the average person doesn't realize that the reason we work for 9 to 5 is because when we moved from the agrarian society towards the factory, those were the days we could have light, right? Because it used to be in factories that they didn't have lights. They just had big windows. That's why all the old factories you see, they have all these windows, and you're like, gosh, what did they? It was because the sunlight was powering the ability to see while you were working on the factory floor before we had lights. So we work from 9 to 5 because that's when the sun was up and we could get work done. Well, now we have most employees working by artificial light on computers that can work 24/7. And what we've done is we've shifted to expecting our employees and our team members to be available 24/7, 365. But there hasn't been any acknowledgement of the fact that the hours have expanded to go beyond light and to dip into their personal lives. And then we wonder why employees are jumping up and down saying, I don't have any work-life balance. It's because we as leaders have expected them not to. And then I run into leaders, Jason, who will say, but no, we have unlimited vacation at our agency. But, we have all kinds of, and I'm like, great. When is the last time you took 2 consecutive weeks of vacation? And agency owners get real sheepish on this one, Jason. They're like, oh, well, and I was like, then how is anyone on your team supposed to think that this is acceptable behavior if you can't remember the last time you took 2 consecutive weeks of vacation? If team members don't see the leaders exhibiting the leader's desired behavior, they will not do that behavior. Yeah. We create our own problems.
Yeah, I really like that, and totally agree. If you had to give 3 different things, like you were talking to yourself 5 years ago before you kind of wrote this book about how you can be a better leader for your team so they don't leave, what would be 3 things that you would do?
Oh, I love this question, Jason. So a couple of things. And I will say, because I know the kind of folks that are in your orbit, right? These are rock stars that are committed to making their lives, their agencies better. These are not going to necessarily be easy things. But since you asked, these are the 3 things that I wish I would have started even more on early on. Number 1, recognize that onboarding a new employee is measured in months, not hours. Onboarding a new employee should be managed in months, plural, not hours. So many agencies think, oh, we're going to bring them up to speed in a day or 2, and then they're going to be producing. Stop thinking that. You aren't that way. When you've had jobs in the past, you weren't a day or 2 into the job and suddenly crushing it and producing. Stop expecting other people to do that, okay? Instead of thinking about all the things a new employee needs to know, think about all the things they need to know on a day-by-day basis. What do I mean by that? At the end of the first day, what are the 3 things that you hope that employee knows? What are the 2 emotions that you've hoped they felt? And what is the 1 action step that they have done that is them starting to live their job. Whether that's sending an email, answering a phone call, preparing a pitch deck, something like that. 3, 2, 1. 3 things they've learned, 2 things they've felt, 1 thing they've done. Take all the things you want them to know and to break it into that framework over the course of weeks. All too often as leaders, we come in and we're like, oh my gosh, I got to tell them every possible scenario that could ever come up in this position. And we just flood and overwhelm them with all these one-off rando case scenarios that happen like once or twice in the operation of our business. And we're thinking that they need to know all of that on day one. They don't. So number 1, think of onboarding in terms of months, not in terms of hours.
When I onboarded Darby, our agency scale specialist, my whole goal was to give him one story for one service every week and just let him build on that. And also, too, just kind of like your other book, How to Never Lose a Client Again, right? Like I remember you talking to us and you were like, yeah, the client signs, you're ringing the gong, hitting the bells, high-fiving, but the client's thinking, shit, did I make the wrong decision? I bet it's the same way with the employee joining the team. Did I make the right decision coming here? So how can you reinforce that even more?
Jason, 100%. And let's make that the second thing. So we've all probably heard of the phrase buyer's remorse. What you may not have thought of in the employee context is something I like to call new hires remorse. It is the exact same scientifically proven reaction that a human being has after they accept a job offer where they begin to doubt the decision they just made. They think to themselves, maybe I should have negotiated for a better salary or a better package. Or maybe they're interviewing for 2 or 3 other jobs that they haven't heard back for. And they're like, well, I had to accept this one, but I hadn't heard back from those other 2. And what if that was a better job and I should have done that? And all of that fear and doubt and uncertainty that they're feeling occurs in this time period between the moment they accept the job and their first official day of work. And what is the communication that comes from the normal leader during that time period or the normal employer? Nothing other than, hey, we'll see you on Monday the 15th at 9 a.m. That's the only communication they're getting. So what can we do? We can use that time period to reaffirm their choice. The secret question to ask yourself in this phase of the employee journey, Jason, is do they know that we're excited that they said yes and that we are beyond eager for their first day on the job? I have not met a human being on the planet, Jason, that doesn't like feeling wanted. Humans love feeling wanted. The best way to counter that new hire's remorse is to remind that new employee, because they've accepted the job offer now, that they are wanted and let that energy lead up until their first day on the job. Third thing, since you asked what I would do, third thing, I don't believe anything will make you a better leader than getting clear on your personal psychology. Getting clear on your own emotions, your own psychology, whether that is spending time on a therapist couch, spending time in meditation, spending time in a mastermind with people who will honestly reflect back to you your behaviors. It is really difficult for us to see the label on the bottle when we're inside the bottle. You've got to have outstanding relationships, whether those are relationships with a trained therapist, whether that's a relationship with a shaman, a best friend, a mastermind member, whatever it is, you've got to have people on the outside who feel comfortable holding up a mirror and saying, do you actually see who you are? The more clear we can get on our own dynamics and how we show up, the better we're going to be able to be honest with our team members and also learn a little bit about where their dynamics are. Those are the 3 things I'd recommend.
My team, going back to that, my team would always get excited when I'm joining a new mastermind because then they'll be like, oh my gosh, he's so energized and excited and bringing new ideas. And you're seeing what's working for other people. And most people don't realize that that happens. And I'm always constantly looking for the next mastermind. And it gets hard because there's so many out there. And it's just, it's it's kind of the
It does.
Wild
It's a challenge. And I also think, how does a conversation with a new employee change when you say to them, hey, I need you to know these are the 3 hardest things about working with me. These are the things that might cause you a struggle when working with me. And here's what I'm doing to try to address those. And here's what I'm trying to do to get better on those. I'm a human being. I'm a work in progress. If you have recommendations on things I can do that can make it easier for you to navigate that, just let me know. But here's the things that I either think or have been told are the hardest parts about working with me. We think nothing of in an interview asking a candidate, what are your biggest weaknesses? Which, by the way, is a lazy question to ask, okay? But it happens often in interviews. Let's flip that script. What if instead we said, let me tell you what my weaknesses are of when you work with me, and let's work together to make those better.
Well, yeah, because you're hiring for the weaknesses. You should be hiring for the weaknesses. Like
I like to think that you need to actively be looking to add people to your team who have skills that you don't. Yep. That's, and this is where we get into diversity of thought, diversity of perspective. If you've had the chance to see the new Barbie movie, okay, there's a great scene in the new Barbie
movie.
There's
no way in hell I'm going to see that.
Oh, Jason, gauntlet thrown down, brother. Homework assignment. You got to go see the Barbie movie. And here's why. Here's why. Okay, well, we can talk offline about why you're resistant to that, okay? But here's one of the many great things about the new Barbie movie. There is this scene, and I'm not really giving anything away because anybody who kind of knows the history of Barbie and kind of the role Barbie has played in society is going to have some perspective on this. But there's a scene in a boardroom with all the executives that work on Barbie, and they're all men.
Oh.
Now, I'm not saying it's bad to have men in the boardroom. Don't misunderstand me. What I am saying is it is really challenging to create a product for little girls when the perspective is being driven by people who've never been a little girl. Yep. It's a fundamental flaw. It's kind of like when we think about designing, when I ran my agency, right? One of the things I always try to do when we were getting ready to pitch a new client, everyone on the team would try to go become a customer of that client. We try to have the experience. So we had some context so that we understood what it was. We'd call in, and often I would secret shop them. I'd call in and try to set up an account and start a project and become a customer. And then that became part of the pitch. I would say, hey, by the way, our job is going to be to create a better experience for your customers. You don't know this, but I became a customer a month ago. Allow me to play some recordings of calls I had with your help center. Allow me to show you screenshots of me going through the sign-up process. And it never ceased to amaze the client that like, oh my God, we had no idea. Why? Because they haven't been a customer recently or ever. And so when we have that perspective, it changes the conversation.
Still not seeing it. I understand the concept though.
We can have that conversation offline.
I remember I went into a meeting. Coca-Cola was one of our clients, and I was meeting with the CMO, and he was one of these executives that was on the Barbie conference room. And our whole market that we were going after was young, urban crowd. He was a fat, white male, old,
suburban.
Like, I don't get it. I'm like, excuse me, you're not going to get it. Like, so just trust us. And I was like, and we put our foot down, and we lost the client, but I wasn't going to do something that wasn't going to work. Like, we have values, and I think everyone needs to do that as well. And your employees will see that, because if they see a client run over you and like destroy your value, they're gonna be like, oh, we're just in it for the money. We're not in it for anything else. And you'll start losing people. That's what I've seen in the past.
100%, because one of the things that I think many employers miss is the way you treat your customers, your clients, is observed by your team. And if they see you treating them poorly, they're going to presume that they're going to be treated poorly. And if they see you treating them well, this is the one where a lot of agency owners fail. And I'm just sorry, we just fail. And I put myself into this category. We will move heaven and earth to make time for a new pitch meeting. We will take a call any time of the day or night from an existing client, but then we will cancel the meeting with our team member or reschedule it. Friends, the number of people that cancel one-on-ones with their direct reports is staggering, and nothing is a faster way to destroy any level of engagement or retention you have than giving your team signals that they don't matter.
Yeah.
Those are the meetings we should never cancel. Those are the meetings that should be a top priority. Those are the meetings that should go in the calendar and be sacrosanct. The clients can wait. And the clients, let's be candid, you probably have more clients than employees. It's easier to replace a client than to replace a team member.
Most definitely.
Don't lose sight of that.
Yep, I love it. I presume the book is everywhere.
The book is everywhere. So if you're the kind of person that likes reading hardcover books, we've got a hardcover version so you can take notes in the margin. If you're into ebooks, we've got a Kindle and Nook version so you can do your highlights and search for stuff. And if you've enjoyed the sound of my voice, I actually narrate the audiobook. So it's available at your favorite bookstore, indie bookstore, big box bookstore, whatever it may be. It's called Never Lose an Employee Again. And I'll just throw this out there because it's something that a lot of agency owners might be familiar with, the guaranteed purchase, right? If you buy the book and you read the book and you're not going to feel, and you get to the end and you're like, I don't feel like I got anything new or any value, Joey. This isn't going to help my business in any way. My email is throughout the book. Send me an email and I'll refund you the price of the book. That's how confident I am, especially as a former agency owner, that this book is going to be able to help you. And I'll put one last plug. There's actually a case study from a world-class agency in Canada called Church and State, run by my buddy Ron Tite, that if you only read that case study, it's like 2 or 3 pages, I think you will have a model for how you should think of your employee relationships as an agency owner, as the leader of an agency owner, because what he has built and continues to build is world-class, and his people not only love working for him, but more importantly, they are zealous advocates for his agency even when they've left to go work for other agencies. That's the gold standard in our world. There's so much turnover in the agency creative world, right? We're not going to get away from that. What you want to be is the employer of choice so that your former employees, when they're on site working with clients or they've moved to a different agency, are still singing your praises. That's how you know you've created something remarkable.
Well, awesome. Well, everyone, make sure you guys go check out Joey's book and check out the old book too. I mean, I had my team read it every couple of years just to be like, hey, how can we make our onboarding process even better? So make sure you go check out his books. And we put out a free masterclass. It's really kind of the ultimate guide to building a profitable sales team where it doesn't depend on the agency owner selling. And we put this free masterclass out. If you go to agencymastery360.com/convert, it will give you 4 videos and all kinds of resources for free that I wish I knew. So make sure you go do that now. And until next time, have a swank day.